Afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Brendan, Magda, for inviting my participation in this. I'll confess up front that I'm going to be focusing more on the political and socioeconomic domains over the methodological, because I think that's what really matters most right now in Canada with respect to supervised consumption sites. And you know, that's really upsetting because when we had a conservative government in power, almost 20 years ago, they went all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada to try and close North America's only supervised injecting site. There, the justices ruled 9-0 in favor of its continued operation. So the fact that these are now being threatened by politicians across the country, I find really remarkable. Also, there's better methodologists here than me, so I'll let them cover that part of it. Okay, so let's just talk a little bit about the state of the evidence. I think it's fair. You know, we have I think 3 or 4 now systematic reviews published demonstrating that, supervised consumption sites have been rigorously evaluated in a whole range of settings. But early on, it was deemed unethical to randomize people to exposure to a supervised consumption site or not. And therefore, methods have really been restricted to observational approaches. I'm sure, as most people know, most conventional grading systems, for example, grade, privileges RCTs over observational evidence, and that has resulted also in some endless critiques of SCS research. But it's clear in the systematic reviews that have been published that the consistent observational evidence does point to a range of benefits. But what about unintended consequences? Well, although this is an intervention really designed to reduce health-related harms, for some reason they're also expected to improve public order, not compromise public safety, or not result in increased crime. In Canada, things were really difficult on this front very early on when in 2003, the president of the Ottawa Police Association said, sitting alongside our federal health minister, it's abundantly clear that a supervised injection site brings an increase in crime. Having reviewed the data, I am reminded of how the political process manipulates data for its own purposes, often at the expense of the obvious truth. At this time, I don't think there was actually a whole bunch of data on crime and this form of intervention. So, look, dark times ahead for supervised consumption sites in Canada. I'll be really clear about that. The following are all very recent developments. In the province of Ontario, the Premier described supervised consumption sites as the worst thing that could happen to a community. Then the health minister went against an independent review recommending the expansion of these interventions and actually banned supervised consumption sites in several locations where the Ford government had previously approved them, with about 20, I think, sites that are scheduled to close in Ontario. But if someone knows the right number and I'm wrong, please speak up. In British Columbia, the individual running for the premiership right now in the Conservative Party has as a platform pledge that he will close our overdose prevention sites. And at the federal level, the Conservative leader, who is expected to win a majority government in a year's time, called supervised consumption sites drug dens, and has said that he would pull funding from supervised consumption sites. So here we are, 14 years after the Supreme Court decision, and supervised consumptions are more threatened than ever, and it's across the country at the provincial and federal level. There was also a lawsuit brought by residents in the Vancouver area who claimed that the opening of this overdose prevention site had created all this public disorder. But they seem to ignore the fact that the homeless count in Greater Vancouver had showed a 32% increase between 2020 and 2023, and of the nearly 5,000 homeless individuals in the core city, 47% were on a housing wait list, despite increases in local social housing. This neighborhood is also home to services for homelessness that were established in the 90s, so it's always been a hub. But unfortunately, the city caved and the site was closed down. So what about unintended consequences? Well, we know there's a growing body of evidence that suggests that These sites don't exacerbate crime and public disorder, and in some cases may actually result in improvements. But we need to strengthen the work in this area, I think, as Magda has well articulated in her presentation. But still, what we have, I think, is a bunch of different methods used in different settings that seem to be showing a similar effect. Early on, our group did this work where we combined ethnographic counts into a quantitative regression models. We looked at the number of people using the facility daily, and we had ethnographic counts of public drug use, and in adjusted regression models that adjusted for police presence and rainfall, because we did this work in the fall, the effect of the site on reductions in public drug use held significant. A couple studies done in Barcelona. The bottom one by Espelt, published in IGADP, I think is a well-controlled time series analysis. And again, they showed no increases in discarded syringes following the opening of the SCS there, and one study showed large reductions in discarded syringes. 6 studies have examined the association between operation of these sites and drug-related crime. 4 conducted in Sydney, 2 in Vancouver, and 1 in New York that we just heard about, looking at a range of outcomes. This was a nice time series analysis done in Vancouver that found no decreases in crime throughout the city of Vancouver. How a sustained decrease was noted in District 1, where the supervised consumption site is located, with an average of 42 crimes a week being reduced. Some public opinion work done in Sydney looked at opinions regarding public disorder among residents and business owners, and both found declines in reports of public injecting in discarded syringes over time. This is the New York study that Magda talked about. I was not aware of that interesting limitation, and note, I had to check my computer before I got up here because the authors didn't note it either. But one thing I would be interested to talk about with the New York folks later is that these folks did look at quite a number of different crimes and not just drug arrests, and I'm wondering how the biases play. But as was mentioned, there was a significant decline in some of these areas. This is an interesting development. It seems that in some places, like the province of Alberta, when people don't like this body of evidence, they manufacture their own. This was an absolutely absurd exercise that happened in Alberta, where they decided that they were going to do a review to minimize, this is before the work was done, to minimize the adverse social and economic impacts of these sites, and to inform future decisions around establishment of them, and to inform a provincial policy that outlines criteria. They primarily relied on public opinion through a complaint phone line. They also had town hall meetings with people very angry, select key stakeholder interviews. They did do a minimal look at crime, but there was no statistical analysis. The work wasn't peer reviewed. They didn't control confounders, and in the end, the results were very mixed. So, I thought I was running out of time, and here I am at the end. I've been talking too fast. So what does this all mean, I think? Well, I think we still have work to do in this area, and we really need to address a very broad set of objective indicators of public disorder and crime, including violence, via a well-controlled study. I'm actually was lucky to be invited to co-author some work being done at the Toronto evaluation. I was thinking of including it today, but I thought it was going to be too much. But a nice study that's now under review that actually did a GIS mapping exercise and looked at homicides in the city of Toronto, and actually found that this site is having no effect, which is interesting because when the health minister in Ontario recently reported that they had to start closing down some sites due to public disorder, she noted that there was actually a homicide in the neighborhood of the supervised consumption site. It kind of inspired me to think about writing an op-ed where I would point to the number of murders that happened in the proximity of Toronto General Hospital and make the argument that it too should be closed. I think we really need to engage publicly trusted stakeholders. So that's not researchers. I'm talking about police and others. We need to engage them in evaluation planning, get them to agree on approaches, and get them to commit to speak to outcomes. I think we need to also utilize approaches that control for background contextual dynamics. So in the case of Vancouver, I think we have a housing crisis. Homelessness is going through the roof. That's something we really need to look at. I think Magda made a nice point that we also need to look at things like historical crime rates and that as well. We really need ongoing and active dissemination in this area, and sadly, we have to spend a lot more time now countering misinformation, which is an unfortunate use of our time. And I also have this dream that one day we'll move beyond the most popular conventional evidence grading systems when evaluating evidence in this area, so that we can start to finally recognize in policies nationally and internationally that these are seem to be quite effective interventions. Thanks very much for your attention.